Hi, everybody. It's Mary, the OG Woo-Woo therapist. And as usual, everything I talk about today is not intended to take the place of counseling or therapy, but to highlight some of the issues that could or need to be addressed with a licensed counselor or therapist. And for some, it will be information to increase understanding for therapeutic issues and processes. None of the information that I'm going to talk about should be used to self-diagnose or diagnose anybody else with a mental health disorder or any issues relating to the topics that I'm going to talk about today. Only a licensed practitioner can and should do that. So today, though, before we start, I want to give another cautionary note here. Before we begin, I want to name something important. This episode is designed with people in mind who live with complex trauma, attachment trauma, or dissociation. It's important to respect safety through pacing and supporting choice. That means we will move slowly. We'll explain concepts in a grounding way, and you're always invited to pause, skip ahead, or come back later. If at any point you notice yourself drifting, numbing, or feeling overwhelmed, that's not failure. That is your nervous system doing its job, and a signal that maybe it's time to contact a counselor or therapist to discuss this reaction. So let's start with basic overview of attachment theory. Attachment theory is, at its core, it explains how early relationships shape the nervous system, not just emotions or beliefs. It's about how safety, connection, and threat are learned in relationships. Primary caregivers are the source of this connection. The child's brain is asking one question over and over. When I'm distressed, does someone come? And what happens when they do? Attachment patterns are adaptive strategies, not personality flaws. The thing to remember is that attachment isn't about how much love there was. It's about how reliably distress was met. We think about attachment styles as survival strategies when needs are not met. The goal is to develop secure attachment, where distress is met consistently enough and the nervous system learns I can feel safe and stay connected. When needs are not met, the survival strategies developed are anxious or preoccupied attachment, where care is inconsistent or unpredictable. The strategy is to amplify signals and stay hyper-attuned. And the core nervous system belief becomes, I must stay activated to stay connected. Then we have avoidant or dismissive attachment, where care is rejecting, intrusive, or emotionally unavailable. The strategy is to suppress needs and self-reliance. The core belief becomes closeness costs too much. And finally, we have disorganized attachment, where the caregiver is simultaneously a source of safety and threat. There is no coherent strategy available, and the core dilemma becomes the person I need is the person I fear. So an important note here is that disorganization is the attachment pattern most linked to trauma and dissociation. Now let's look at what attachment trauma actually means. Attachment trauma is not defined by single events. It emerges from chronic relational misattunement, fear, neglect, or role reversal. Please excuse me. It is especially potent when the child cannot escape. The caregiver controls survival. The child must preserve attachment at all costs. Attachment trauma teaches my needs are dangerous. Connection requires losing myself. I must manage others' emotions to stay safe, which is where we see parentification of children happen pretty significantly with CPTSD. So what is the difference between attachment trauma versus trauma? A good distinction is that trauma is a shock trauma that overwhelms the nervous system. Attachment trauma organizes the nervous system. Attachment trauma shapes how closeness feels in the body, whether safety increases or decreases with intimacy, and how threat is perceived in neutral relationships. The key thing to remember here is that attachment trauma doesn't just hurt, it scripts how relationships feel. When we look at attachment through the nervous system lens or the polyvagal lens, we see that attachment experiences train autonomic nervous expectations. And the autonomic nervous system is that nervous system that regulates our body without us thinking about it. Secure attachment develops into flexible movement between the states. Anxious attachment, there's chronic sympathetic activation, constantly on alert. Avoidant attachment, dorsal leaning shutdown, and cognitive control. Disorganized attachment, rapid, chaotic state shifts. This is why insight alone doesn't change attachment patterns. And while clients may understand, they may still feel unsafe in connection. And in just a little bit, I will describe the polyvagal theory to you. Attachment trauma shows up clinically through these common presentations: intense fear of abandonment and fear of engulfment, hypervigilance to tone, pauses, microshifts, emotional flooding or emotional numbing in intimacy, shame after expressing my needs, dissociation during closeness or conflict, repetition of relational roles, caretaker, appeaser, invisible one, which is where we kind of recreate the relational role that we are most comfortable living in. And what we have to keep in mind here is that what looks like resistance is often attachment protection. There is hope because attachment trauma is relationally healed. Attachment trauma cannot be fully resolved in isolation. Healing requires a relationship where distress is allowed, repair is explicit, and ruptures are survivable. New experiences of staying connected while dysregulated, being seen without performing, having needs without punishment. This is why the therapeutic relationship matters so much, especially timing, pacing, and repair. Many times the therapist is the first consistent relationship that is experienced. Here are the treatment implications for working with attachment trauma. I have to go slow and help with building insight. And we can go fast as long as it's safe. I have to track the nervous system, not just the narrative. So I have to watch very carefully when I'm engaging with my clients to see if they're in some type of state of abreaction. I have to watch their body language, their facial expressions, and their eye contact. A lot of times I'll have clients that will be good at eye contact with me, but then when they feel unsafe, suddenly I will lose eye contact with them. And that's when I need to stop and check in and find out what's going on. Also, I have to expect attachment patterns to activate in therapy. I have to name the pattern without pathologizing it, normalize ambivalence about being close, and use repair as intervention, not just etiquette. And what that looks like, because I frequently do this with my clients that have CPTSD, is that I will say something or do something, and the client will feel not quite safe enough to say, Mary, that was messed up what you just said. That made me feel some kind of way that does not feel good. And when that happens, the onus is on me to make the repair in the relationship so that they can feel safe. So the core stance with the treatment implications is that the work is not to make attachment needs disappear. It's to make them safe. The thing for clients to remember is that your attachment system learned what it needed to survive. Your reactions make sense given what your nervous system learned early, usually during the magical thinking stage, and we're not erasing these strategies, we're updating them. And nothing is wrong with your need for connection. So attachment theory is about how human beings learn safety and connection. From the moment we're born, our nervous systems are wired to depend on other people. As babies and children, we can't regulate ourselves alone. We rely on someone else to notice us, soothe us, and help our bodies calm down. When I talk about attachment, I'm not talking about traits or labels. I'm talking about procedural learning, what the nervous system learned to expect from other humans. A metaphor I often use clinically is this: the nervous system is born without an instruction manual. It learns entirely through experience. So very early on, the nervous system starts asking one question: when I'm distressed, does someone come? And what happens when they do? This question is being answered hundreds of times a day in infancy, long before explicit memory forms. Imagine a baby crying at night. When someone comes consistently and with enough calm, the baby's body settles. Over time, the nervous system learns distress can move toward connection. When care is unpredictable, frightening, or absent, the nervous system adapts differently, not cognitively, but physiologically. This is why attachment is not about love or intention. It's about nervous system state regulation in relationship. In CPTSD and dissociative presentations, attachment doesn't just live in the nervous system, it often dominates it. Many people with complex trauma don't just experience threat. They lived in environments where threat and attachment were intertwined. A metaphor I often use here is a smoke detector that was installed in a burning building. Of course it's sensitive. In CPTSD, what looks like hyperreactivity is often an accurate detection, just applied to a new environment. In dissociation, the system may respond differently. Instead of sounding the alarm, it may cut the power. That is not a failure of awareness. It's a survival-based conservation response. The clinical implication here is that with CPTSD and dissociation, our goal is not activation, it's capacity. So we talk about window of tolerance when we are talking about the nervous system in terms of activation. When we talk about attachment patterns, it can be helpful to think less in terms of personality and more in terms of protective responses inside the nervous system. Different responses may come online in different situations. You might notice that one part of you longs for closeness while another pulls away, shuts down, or stays on high alert. That doesn't mean you're inconsistent. It means your system learned more than one way to survive. These responses often developed at different times, under different conditions, and with different jobs. Let's take a closer look at anxious or preoccupied attachment. In anxious attachment, one protective response becomes especially active around connection. This response is often oriented towards maintaining proximity. It may monitor others closely, amplify emotional signals, or push for reassurance. This part is not trying to create drama, it's trying to prevent loss. So imagine a younger part of the system that learned early on that connection could disappear without warning. Its job became staying alert, watching tone, timing, and distance, so attachment wouldn't break. In adult relationships, this can show up as hypervigilance to distance or silence, escalation or effect to restore closeness, shame or self-criticism after expressing needs. This response often softens when it feels there is backup, when it's not carrying the entire burden of connection alone. Now, a closer look at avoidant or dismissive attachment. In avoidant attachment, a different protective response takes the lead. This response is is often organized around reducing exposure. It may limit emotional expression, rely on thinking over feeling, or pull away under stress. This part is not cold or uncaring. It's protecting against overwhelm or rejection. So imagine a part of a picture or picture a part of the system that learned that needing others lead to pain or shame. Its solution was to become competent, independent, and self-contained. In adult relationships, this can look like distancing during emotional intensity, feeling flooded by others' needs, disappearing internally when closeness increases. This response often relaxes when closeness feels optional rather than demanded. And finally, disorganized attachment, usually most associated with CPTSD and dissociation. In disorganized attachment, multiple protective responses may activate at once. One part of the system may reach for closeness, while another one prepares for danger, and another moves towards shutting down or leaving awareness. A useful way to think about this is overlapping protection, not confusing. Imagine a system where one response says, go closer, another says, get away, and another says, freeze, so nothing gets worse. All are trying to help. In adulthood, this can show up as push-pull relational dynamics, rapid shifts in emotion or perception, and dissociation or loss of continuity during intimacy. Healing involves helping these responses notice one another, not forcing them to agree or disappear. Because of this attachment style, this is where we often see CPTSD misdiagnosed as borderline personality disorder, because these are strong characteristics with that. Now, the real question is, what is attachment trauma? When people hear the word trauma, they often think of single events. Attachment trauma is different. It usually comes from ongoing relational experiences, things like emotional neglect, chronic misattunement, fear, unpredictability, or being required to take care of adults' emotions. Attunement trauma teaches the nervous system powerful lessons. Again, my needs are dangerous. I have to manage others to stay safe. Being close means losing myself. These are not thoughts you choose. They are protective learning. In CPTSD, attachment trauma tends to generalize across systems: the emotional system, relational, cognitive, and somatic. A metaphor that resonates here is trying to live in the present with a nervous system trained for captivity from the past. Even safe relationships can trigger responses shaped by long-term threat. Clinically, this can look like emotional flashbacks without any narrative memory to go with it, collapse, numbing, or depersonalization during closeness, intense shame following need expression, and parts of self holding contradictory relational rules. Many clients fear that these responses mean they are regressing. In reality, they are often surfacing because safety has increased. For CPTSD and dissociative presentations, healing involves working with protective responses rather than against them. Different parts of the system may need different things. Some need reassurance, some need distance, some need time before they trust that closeness won't cost too much. A helpful metaphor here is a team that learned to survive without a coordinator. Healing doesn't mean firing the team. It means helping them communicate, slow down, and share the load. In practice, this looks like noticing which response is present, naming its protective intention, allowing choice rather than override, and creating experiences where no single part has to handle everything. The goal is not to eliminate these responses. The goal is to help the system feel supported enough that protection can soften when it's no longer needed. So if this resonated with you, I want to say this very clearly. Your system adapted brilliantly to prolonged relational threat. Dissociation, fragmentation, and attachment strategies were not malfunctions, they were solutions. Healing does not mean undoing them. It means helping your nervous system learn that survival is no longer the only job. And now let's just go over a brief overview of polyvagal theory, and you will hear me talk about this a lot in the upcoming broadcast, and I have mentioned it in the past. So it focuses on how the body responds before the mind has time to think. Not why am I like this, but what state is my nervous system in right now? We don't just switch between calm and stressed. The autonomic nervous system has three main response pathways organized by evolutionary priority. The body automatically moves down the hierarchy when safety decreases. The three autonomic pathways, ventral vagal, where social engagement, curiosity, and flexibility, the ability to feel emotions without being overwhelmed. I'm here, I'm okay, I can connect. Second, the sympathetic nervous system, which is the mobilization system, or as we commonly talk about, the fight or flight. Energy, urgency, anxiety, and anger come from there. Focus narrows towards the threat, and the thought is, I need to do something now. Third, dorsal vagal, or shutdown or immobilization. Collapse, numbness, dissociation, or exhaustion. Conservation of energy when escape feels impossible. And the thought is, there's no way out. So neuroception, safety without thinking. The nervous system constantly scans for cues of safety or danger, and this is called neuroception. It happens outside conscious awareness. Past trauma can cause misfiring neuroception, where safety still feels unsafe. Trauma isn't just about what happened, it's about what state the nervous system got stuck in. Many symptoms are state dependent, not character flaws. Hypervigilant is usually associated with sympathetic system being activated. Emotional numbing, shutting down, freezing, dorsal vagal protection. Healing involves shifting through those states, not forcing insight. Why this matters is because regulation comes before cognition. You can't talk someone into feeling safe if their nervous system doesn't feel it. Therapy becomes about creating cues of safety, expanding capacity to move beyond states or between states, and increasing access to ventral vagal connection. Your nervous system isn't broken. It learned how to protect you. Symptoms are adaptive responses that may no longer be needed. The goal isn't to eliminate states, but to increase flexibility and choice. So with that brief overview, I'm going to leave it there for this week, and I will be back next week with the next podcast, where I will be going into more detail with some of the things that I spoke about today. And I just want to thank you for joining me in my home office today. We have some traffic noise going on outside, so my apologies for anything that might feel distracting or disruptive. And I hope that this information has been something that you enjoyed. If so, please give it a like and subscribe, and I will be back next week. Thank you for listening.